Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kennedy Report. Welcome to TKR. We're going to talk about something a tad bit controversial today. And before I continue, if there's any problems with the audio, please let me know. I think I got it sorted. I got a video here I want to play of Father Ripperger. And I'm going to talk about my great respect for Father Ripperger really soon. And why I think he's an incredible priest, and there's nothing about this live stream that is anti-Father Ripperger whatsoever. But before I do so, I actually want to talk about my new sponsor, because we've got a sponsor here. So, time of economic uncertainty, you're probably thinking about what the heck you're going to do about inflation. So you've probably had different investments over the years, mutual funds, investments in stocks, and so forth. You know these things can be volatile and unpredictable. With inflation running at its highest rate in 40 years, you don't want volatility or uncertainty. This is to be sure. Being able to sleep at night knowing your investment isn't about to crash is worth its weight in gold. And speaking of gold, if you've been jumping from one investment idea to the next, a gold IRA with Noble Gold is perfect for you. A reliable hedge against inflation just fell in our laps. With gold, you shield your gains from taxes. You keep the real value of your wealth. You own a global asset, something tangible, and you can protect your wealth against an economic crash, which, let's be honest, might be around the corner. What's not to like? This month, for every IRA above 20K, you get an incredible 3-ounce silver Virtue American coin, completely free as a thank you. That is a cash value to it, by the way. So call 1-877-646-5347 now, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com to find out more. The links for all of that are in my description. Once again, that's Noble Gold Investments. Thank you to my sponsor, Noble Gold. Okay, so we're going to talk about this idea that Father Ripperger has said in the past, that there are reasons why we should probably stay away from the Sspx. He's got a much more nuanced opinion than people give him credit for. I don't know Father Ripperger personally, but I can tell you that I think he is an incredible, incredible priest. I cite him heavily in my book, Terror of Demons, Reclaiming Traditional Catholic Masculinity, and I'm such a moron that I forgot to have a copy here to show you. But I've cited him heavily in that book. His talks, well, all of his talks have been amazing, but especially one on how to raise a man. That talk was actually one of the inspirations for why I wrote that book. And in fact, many quotes from that appear in that book. He's an incredible priest. He's an absolutely remarkable priest. I mean, you don't get much better than a man who spends his time, basically healing souls from demonic possession. That's remarkable stuff. So I think he's an absolute hero. People that I have talked to about him say that he is basically a living saint. I think that's probably true. I've never met him, but I've heard only good things. The kind of man who would give the shirt off his back, or I guess the cassock off his back. But the Society of St. Pius X issue is a debatable issue. It just is. There have been great churchmen who have said different things. For example, Cardinal Burke has said that he thinks they're in schism, but Cardinal Gagnon, who did the visitation in 1987-88, he said that they were totally fine. Bishop Schneider in 2015 had a different opinion than Cardinal Burke. Various penalties have been lifted over the years. So we're going to get into some more inside baseball on the topic and kind of what Father Ripperger has said on the issue. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to play a video from him, and I think I'm going to get the audio to work. If I don't have the audio to work, I know exactly what he says in the video. I just don't want to misrepresent him. The last thing I want is for people to say that I've misrepresented Father Ripperger. So I'm going to just play this here, and please let me know in the chat if you can actually hear the information, which I think you can. And if we can't, I actually have a solution. It'll be a little bit janky, but we'll make it work. But I need to hear this. So we're not going to listen to all 8 minutes of it in a row. I'm just going to go through some parts, and then I have something that I want to share to sort of discuss the things that he has done. One more thing before I continue. This is not an SSPX versus FSSP versus blah, 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 blah. This is nothing like that at all. I don't even think Father Ripperger is in the FSSP anymore. I think he left on good terms, but I think he started his own things called the DeLorens. They're like a society of priests, exorcist priests and things. So, this is and I'll have questions later. So, um, someone says your screen looks kind of purple. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in a purple mood today. Uh, so, if you have any questions after I've sort of gone through the meat of what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to ask you to do is I've got some mods. They can help me out. But what I'm going to ask you to do is put 3 question marks in front because I can't keep up with all the chat. There's already almost 100 people in the chat, and there's just one of me. So, anyway, let me know if you can hear this live in the chat here. If you can't, then I will figure something else out that I know will work. Okay, so they're saying audio down. That's what I feared was happening. So, no sound in the video. Yeah, I tried to figure that out. Don't know how. So for the time being, my speakers, put my microphone near it. It's kind of ghetto, but it's going to work. Trust me. So I got this. I've got this excellent microphone here. So let's just try this. Hold on. Really good man, wanting to do the right thing. That's my experience with the vast majority of them. As to their status, of course, the church has made itself very clear. The excommunication of the bishops, because the excommunication didn't apply to the whole Sspx, it just applied to the 4 bishops. And then only those who formally adhered to the schismatic act of consecration were also subject to that excommunication. If they didn't, then they were excommunicated even during that time. The church then lifted the excommunication, so technically speaking, they are Catholic people. Okay, so God bless this amazing microphone. This is I owe Mike Church thanks for this. This is what I was using when I was on the Crusade channel. Everyone should go to the Crusade channel, and I'll turn it up for the next one. Sure, my friend, they're telling me to turn it up. In any case, I'm going to just basically what Father Ripperger just said there is he said that he said exactly what the sort of mainstream view would be. He said they are not schismatic per se. They're not under penalties in the sense that they were in 1988. But there was a schismatic thing that took place. He sort of takes that at face value. So I'm going to read something here that basically is the best thing I've ever found on the Society of St. Pius X. It's a little bit long, but it is like the greatest thing ever. And our friend here says Sabu Uncia. That's not a cool name. Is it your real name or is it like a YouTube name? But it's cool if it's real. He says this is also from years ago. Yeah, Father Ripperger, he may have changed his mind. I have no idea. I have no idea. No idea. But anyway, it's just, there's lots of stuff out there that goes around about this. So, okay, this document right here, this was written by a priest, and his name was Father Meuli. Okay. And I'm just going to go to the bottom of the document right here. And you can't probably see the whole thing, but just so you know that I'm not making this up. So Father Meuli was from New Zealand, and he's sort of a legend. So you can see that he was ordained in 1956. Okay, I'll make that a little bit bigger. There you go. He was ordained in 1956. He was from New Zealand. He was ordained before the council. Not only was he ordained a priest, though, and you can see that he had a ton of education right here. Okay, he secured a doctorate in theology at the Gregorian in 1959. He also graduated with a Bachelor of Laws, so he became a lawyer. So he was admitted as a barrister and a solicitor in the Supreme Court of New Zealand that same year. So we're talking about a man who is educated in an excellent. He was educated in an excellent seminary, or it's that thing in Rome before the council, and then he also became a lawyer in the Supreme Court level in a Commonwealth country. That's no small feat. Anyway, he was amazing, and he was kind of a traditional legend. So he went with the changes best as he could, and then he defended the Latin Mass and so on and so forth. So he was trained in canon law. He was also trained in law, which is actually really important. We'll talk about why an understanding of law is important as well, because the church has laws, and they're not just in the vacuum or in this nebulous place where, law in the sense of natural law and divine law doesn't apply to church law. It's human law. The canon law is human law. So we have to understand it in the way we understand law in general. Okay, so I'm going to skip down a little bit here. He had received, this priest, he had received a scandalous email. This is from 2001. So this is long before any excommunications were declared to have been lifted. So this is long before that. Anyway, he says, I'm going to start here where it says this further. Further, the term schism is at large misunderstood. Schism is the total rejection of the authority of the Pope. Impossible to predicate that of those who dutifully pray for the reigning pontiff at the appropriate place in the canon of the Mass. Impossible to predicate that of consecrators who publicly proclaim the conferral of jurisdiction to be to them ultra vires, beyond their powers and not to be within their intention. Concerning that, in the matter of the consecration of a bishop, account is to be had of a major distinction, that between the power of order and the power of jurisdiction. These powers have different causes. The power of order, namely, the power to confirm and ordain, comes from the sacrament of holy order, while the power of jurisdiction, according to the teaching of Pius XII in Mystici Corporis, comes from the Pope. It is, in his words, received from the sovereign pontiff himself. For a bishop to confer the power of order without a papal mandate is not a schismatic act. So that's what happened in 1988. The code makes that limpidly clear. According to circumstances, it may or may not be disobedience. If it turns out to be disobedience, according to further circumstances, it may or may not turn out to be punishable. Not all disobedience is punishable by law in the church. It is a totally different issue for a bishop to attempt to confer the power of jurisdiction as distinct from the power of order. An attempt to confer the power of jurisdiction would be to arrogate to oneself a power belonging to the Pope alone, and hence would be a rejection of papal authority. That is patently a schismatic act. That would be setting up a parallel church. That did not take place, as was affirmed in the public declarations of the ordaining prelates. Any intention to attempt to confer jurisdiction was expressly excluded. Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and his co-consecrator Bishop Castro Meyer were at pains to make known that they were about to confer orders, not jurisdiction. They acknowledged that to confer jurisdiction was beyond their power and outside their intention, even if it were within their power. The relevant canon is 751. This is what is written in Pope John Paul's letter that declared that the Sspx bishops had excommunicated themselves, which Father Ripperger had referred to as being sort of a fait accompli, something that was just accepted as being done. And the canon is 751. The defining word in that canon is detractatio, by which is meant a refusal of all submission. It is precisely this all-encompassing rejection which differentiates schism from disobedience. An example will aid comprehension. One can obey one's parents even in serious matters and not reject their authority. That is, one can obey but still recognize that they are one's parents with legitimate authority over one even while disobeying them. My children do this to me all the time. That is no more than disobedience. Schism would be to reject the totality of the parental authority. Cardinal Rosalio Lara, president of the Pontifical Commission for the Authentic Interpretation of Canon Law, points out that the Code of Canon Law makes this same distinction. In commenting on the consecrations by Monsignor Lefebvre on July 10th, 1988, he states, the act of consecrating a bishop without a papal mandate is not in and of itself a schismatic act. In fact, the code that deals with offenses is divided into two sections. One deals with offenses against religion and the unity of the church, and these are apostasy, schism, and heresy. Consecrating a bishop without a pontifical mandate is, on the contrary, an offense against the exercise of a specific ministry. In case it is not clear, Cardinal Lara is stating that schism is one thing and dealt with in its part of the code, whereas consecration without papal mandate is another thing and dealt with in its own part of the code. The usurpation of ecclesiastical functions is not a rejection of papal authority. Hence, the characterization of any such usurpation as schism is mistaken. It is a fiction not supported by the law. In his apostolic letter, Ecclesia Dei Adflicta, this is a letter put out by Pope John Paul II in 1988, which was said to be no longer binding in 2009, but nonetheless, Father Ripperger in this video was referring to that act in 1988 as if it were just sort of a done deal. At least that's how it's presented. The Holy Father writes of the subject act of disobedience in the following terms. In itself, this act was one of disobedience to the Roman pontiff in a very grave matter and of supreme importance for the unity of the Church, such as is the ordination of bishops, whereby the apostolic succession is sacramentally perpetuated. But then remarkably, this is the Father Maiuli speaking here, the Holy Father draws a conclusion not found in the premises. He writes, hence, such disobedience, which implies in practice a true repudiation of the Roman primacy, constitutes a schismatic act. That utterance is supported neither by the premises nor by the law. What may be the explanation of this anomaly? Either the Holy Father is using the term schism loosely, that is to say equivocally, or he is simply mistaken. It does not appear that he is using the term equivocally. Were he using it equivocally, that's how I should say it, it would be inappropriate to cite, as he, or perhaps the editors of the AAS apostolic letter did, those canons of the Code of Canon Law which refer to schism as it is understood by the Code. But then how can he be mistaken? That is easily explained. The Holy Father is a professional philosopher. Remember, John Paul II was still alive when he wrote this. He taught philosophy for decades. He is a theologian. He is an acclaimed literator. He is no jurist. For the accurate presentation of the law in any writing of his, he relies on his advisors. They have served him badly. The mistake they made is so clamorously obvious, the suspicion arises that they had an agendum of their own. He gives more stuff here, but there's a lot that he goes through. I don't want to read the whole thing because it'll take up a lot of the show. But one important thing here is if we just skip down, and I recommend you can all find this if you look up Father Maiuli. It's Meuli. It's a letter available. This is how much I care about getting the truth out there. I actually spent $15 of my own dollars. I'll probably cancel the subscription within 2 weeks and not have to pay for the membership. But you can find this for free at Gloria TV. So he makes it very clear here. Okay. He talks about what happened in 1988 was a late sententia excommunication, which basically means someone had to have excommunicated themselves. Okay. But here's the thing. Canon 1323 states that no one is liable to a penalty who, when violating a law or precept, violates it under certain defined circumstances. These circumstances are contained in 7 subsections, of which subsections 4 and 7 are relevant. Subsection 4 exempts from penalty one who acted by reason of necessity. That's what the Society has always said. In the common estimation of a man, necessity arises when there is a crisis. Cardinal Ottaviani speaks of a spiritual crisis without precedent. Cardinal Ratzinger states there is a crisis of faith and of the Church. In his form of my life, he writes, I am convinced the ecclesial crisis in which we find ourselves today depends in great part on the collapse of the liturgy. Paul VI, on 3 separate occasions, gave expression to his grief at the collapse of the Church. This priest is dead now, but he gave his phone number if you could call him and ask him. Anyway, that's also not including Canon 1324, which gives other stipulations as well. Okay, so why did I bring this up? Father Ripperger isn't referring to the idea as a whole of this whole idea that he didn't give a big explanation of what had happened. But why I wanted to bring that up is because, at least in that part, he sort of just says the Sspx is in the Church now, but there was this thing that happened in 1988, but then that was lifted. Here I wanted to basically give another opinion about what actually happened in 1988 from a man who was, this letter that I just read, it's not my opinion. This is the opinion of a great priest of the Church who was extremely competent in these matters. And so I think that even the idea that the excommunications of 1988 were valid, I think that's extremely dubious. So that's worth remembering when we continue to watch the rest here from Father Ripperger. I'm going to do this makeshift way of getting our audio good here. I'm going to play some more from this clip. Everything's on full audio, so this should be good.
The Vatican has, however, said repeatedly that the priests exercise their public ministry, which is technical language for saying that they even said this later, that the suspensio ad divinis, which is basically a priest being forbidden to exercise his priesthood, that they put in place over Lefebvre's group in the 1970s is still in force.
Okay, so if you didn't catch that, he's basically saying, yes, they're under no excommunication or penalties or schism and so forth. That's been all dealt with. But they're under some sort of suspension, which was something that stemmed from the 1970s. Okay, so what happened to the Sspx in the 1970s? So the Sspx was established in the normal fashion. If you want to know more about this, you can watch the last show I did on this, where I did more of these details. But the Sspx was established in the normal fashion. I recommend reading Michael Davies' Apologia Pro Lefebvre, Volume 1. You can read all about that. It's very simple and easy to read. And by the way, I'll get to the questions in a bit. If I just get to them now, I see there's lots. I will lose my train of thought. And that's not good because I can get distracted. Okay, so 1970s Sspx was set up. Okay. Once a Society of Apostolic Life is set up, then there's a way that it could be suppressed. But once it's already set up in a diocese, it was in 3 dioceses by the time it was said to have been suppressed. To suppress it, you have to follow a particular legal framework. For the sake of our conversation, I won't explain all aspects of it, but that legal framework wasn't followed. Now, Paul VI came out with a statement basically saying, it's regrettable, but this thing is suppressed. But again, he didn't follow the legal framework. The thing is, in the church, even the Pope has to follow the law. It's just like in society. A judge has to follow the law. The reason why we have laws in the church is because laws are binding on human beings. We have divine law, we have natural law. These things are higher than human law, and canon law is just law. It is human law, no more, no less. In canon law, there can be divine things explained. So, for example, we have, under the normal circumstances, we have to go to Mass on Sunday to fulfill our Sunday obligation. And that is what? That is the human law giving us our stipulations on how to fulfill the divine law of sanctifying the Lord's Day, keeping the Lord's Day holy, following the 10 Commandments. But of course, there are reasons why you wouldn't be able to fulfill the human law, because you could be sick or not be able to go because of travel or something like that. So the suspensions that happened to the Sspx in the 1970s were actually in and of themselves illegally done. We see this in great theologians like Augustine and Aquinas. Unjust law. An unjust law is no law. And why is that? Because ultimately a law is a matter of justice. And justice is ultimately a matter of religion. Justice is the virtue of religion. This is why when we're talking about laws in the church, we need to be extremely careful that all of the laws are followed properly with their ultimate end, which is justice, which is ultimately for the virtue of religion. It's really a shameful thing when in the Catholic Church we have laws and we don't follow them. Because ultimately, as I've said, laws are about justice, and justice is ultimately about the virtue of religion. We owe God our worship. We owe God our sacrifice. That is the ultimate end of justice itself, because it's a transactional thing between what is owed to Him by us for for Him being our creator, and so on and so forth. This is why we know by the natural law that Catholicism is a true religion, because it contains all the precepts of justice, as seen by the natural law, but also contains the true sacrifice. So it's the only way to fulfill the ultimate end of justice through the Catholic Church, through the Mass. The laws of the church were not followed in the case of Marcel Lefebvre. And it's sad. I saw a guy on that debate on Matt Fradd's show the other day. He was acknowledging, I think it was Andrew Bartel, he was acknowledging, well, we can say it was illegal, but it doesn't matter. And I'm paraphrasing. No, it really, really does matter. The dealings with the Sspx have been illegal since the start. It's just a fact. So when you're dealing with an illicit law, or a law not done properly, you have a few options. One is you can just submit to it, and I guess you have two options, really. One is you can submit to it and just sort of grit your teeth and bear it. And sometimes that's the prudent thing to do. We've all been through this the last couple of years. We had a lot of illegal things happen to us in our countries, in our jurisdictions, for matters of, safety. And in those cases, we decided prudently how to deal with them. But we knew those laws were not binding. Even when they were said by churchmen, we knew that they were ridiculous, because we knew the reasoning behind it was suspect. The main reason why Marcel Lefebvre was dealt with in such a sketchy manner is because he refused to say the Latin Mass. And along came Pope Benedict in 2007 and said the Latin Mass is never abrogated. What does that mean? It means it was wrong to suspend or to penalize Marcel Lefebvre for not saying a Mass when that thing itself wasn't suspended. Sorry, for not saying a Mass when the Mass that he was saying wasn't suspended. This has been the long-standing problem since the new Mass, is we have two rites of the same rite, in a sense. We have the new order of Mass, the Novus Ordo, and we have the traditional Mass, the Vetus Ordo, the old order, the extraordinary form. But if both of them are just the Mass, then it stands to reason that a Catholic priest in the Western Rite can just say Mass, and they're ultimately supposed to be kind of the same thing. This is what Benedict said in 2007. Of course, that's changed now with Pope Francis saying that the new Mass is the unique expression of the Roman Rite. That's not really the case. Anyway, Father Ripperger has some more here as well. I'll play it for us, and we'll continue this conversation.
So that technically speaking, they cannot engage in any kind of public ministry, like saying Mass publicly, or you actually technically can't say Mass at all.
That's not true. He said that because they're under suspension, which we've said doesn't really apply, they can't say Mass at all, especially publicly. The problem is that in 2000, in year 2000, before that letter that I just read was written, thousands of Sspx faithful and the priests went to Rome and were welcomed by the Vatican. They didn't say Mass in a parish church, but they were there, and it was what a nice affair. Also, Cardinal Gagnon in 1988, when the society, because Father Ripperger here is saying that the society are not under excommunications, but there are still this suspension. Well, Cardinal Gagnon, who was the most trusted man in Rome for about 20 years, he was the man who was charged with doing an investigation into who the Freemasons were in the Roman Curia. Talk about a big-time job. He was the man entrusted with the visitation of the Sspx 1987, 1988. He was a cardinal of the Catholic Church, probably the last great Canadian saint. And he was also the man that Pope John Paul II called on as he woke up from his coma after almost being shot to death by the assassin, because Cardinal Gagnon had predicted that John Paul II would be assassinated based on his information. And John Paul II said to him, who would want to kill the Holy Father? And then when he came out of the coma from being shot, he thought, I should have listened to that Gagnon fella. Cardinal Gagnon went to the society seminaries in 1988, 87, 88, whenever it was before the consecration. When the society priests were technically under suspensions, he assisted at Mass in his complete Episcopal cardinal garb. So he believed that they had no problem saying Mass, and he was the one charged with Rome for visiting them. So that's interesting. Also, Canon 1335 of canon law says that any member of the faithful can approach a priest for any just cause, even if they're suspended. So even if they were suspended and the faithful were approaching the SSPX for a just cause, that just cause could be saying Mass because they can't hear Mass otherwise. So let's keep listening.
And so that's juridically and canonically where the church has made itself very clear. It's just that everybody's arguing and nobody's paying attention to because they
juridically and canonically, the church has made itself very clear. The church has not made itself very clear on the SSPX. That's one of the problems. Even before the obvious granting of faculties in the last 5 to 10 years. In 2009, the SSPX was asked to move their ordinations out of Germany because the German bishops are very temperamental, as we know, and they didn't want them to do their ordinations there. So they moved their ordinations out of Germany, and they were afforded directly from the Holy Father. It was so strange. 2 weeks of being perfectly awesome, above board, normal Catholic priests with no problems whatsoever. So for 2 weeks, they were just as normal as your local parish priest. For 2 weeks, they had the same rights as James Martin. Figured that out. So even there, no, the church has not been clear at all. The church has been clear that the SSPX you can go there for Mass and so on and so forth, but there's been tons of documents that have been come out that are all over the map. I mean, you'll have, popes speaking out of both sides of their mouth about the SSPX. It's very strange. So I would challenge that the idea that it's been very clear for the opinion that Father Ripperger is asserting. See what else has to say.
Observation. I actually said this once from the pulpit, of course, my parishioners, by the time it was done, I think they felt so beat up by the time I left that parish that they thought, damn, we don't get another priest like that. But I basically made the observation that traditionalists are some of the worst modernists on the planet. Because everything is conformed to themselves. So if the Vatican comes out and says the priests don't exercise any public ministry, it's over. They're the ones who have the right to make that. They're the ones who have the jurisdiction to make that determination. It's over. It's like, I don't like this. The church is blah, blah, blah. Look, one of the things that has me very concerned is this. The church in the past said that when it came to the liturgy, or to the sacraments, specifically, the priest is required to follow what's called the tutorist position. Now, there's two moral systems that have been condemned. The first is laxism, which means that, any reason whatsoever justifies my doing whatever I want to do. And then there's the tutorist position that says you must always follow the most strictest interpretation of the law. They condemn that as a moral system as well. So the church says you can hold anything in it. Okay. Not when it comes to the sacraments. The tutorist position of the sacraments means you must be as absolutely morally certain that the validity and the laicity of those sacraments are occurring every time you do it. Okay. So what does this mean? Speculation about whether a particular priest or group of priests has supplied jurisdiction is contrary to the tradition.
That's a big statement. Let's see if it's true. So Father Ripperger is saying that when it comes to the sacraments, we can't play with this idea of having any speculation about whether or not priests have both laicity and validity. So what is validity? Validity means valid sacraments. Okay, well, here's the thing. In canon law, in canon 844, it says for moral impossibility, you could seek out sacraments from the Orthodox priests. Now, obviously, we don't believe the Orthodox priests have laicity, i.e. permission from the Roman pontiff or the proper channels to do what they do. I don't want to get into the Orthodox Catholic debate. That's not my thing anyway. But just from a perspective of canon law, it's clearly not there. But for moral impossibility, meaning we have reasons to be morally certain, which you just talked about, that we can't attend a Roman Catholic Mass, that we could actually attend sacraments from the Orthodox. So I guess Father Ripperger is right under the normal circumstances. If the SSPX was just some renegade cowboy group that just kind of did its own thing because they were just really into a particular liturgy and everything was totally fine in the church, then yeah, it'd be pretty sketchy. But the matter of crisis is actually extremely important. And crisis is implied in Canon 844 and in Canon 1324. And it allows you to have sort of extraordinary circumstances or extraordinary ways of fulfilling certain circumstances. There's also an example from tradition from a saint of the church, St. Eusebius of Samosate. So Father Ripperger here is talking about things as they would apply to the normal circumstances. And of course, this is how it would apply to the normal circumstances. But what happened in the 4th century, St. Eusebius of Samosate, which was actually the exemplar that Marcel Lefebvre sort of looked to for justification for what he ended up doing. So St. Eusebius of Samosate was exiled. I don't know if it was more than once. In the past, when we would hear words like exile, a lot of the time exile and excommunication were sort of used interchangeably. There was a time when, for example, the emperor would actually call for a council to happen. Can you imagine today? Can you imagine Joe Biden saying, "I'm calling on the church for an ecumenical council"? It's absurd. But there was a deeper understanding of the Catholicity of the state and the rights of Christ the King, which is an amazing thing. It's just so foreign to us today. Anyway, the Arian crisis was a big deal. The Arian crisis was obviously a heretical crisis. Arianism is a heresy. Saint Eusebius of Samosate was a bishop. And after he returned from exile to whichever part of I think it was near Asia Minor, sort of in the eastern part of Europe, North Africa area. I might be wrong, but that area. When he returned to where he was located, he went around conferring the power of orders, both for priests and bishops as well, I believe, on Catholic priests. And the reason he did so is he said he did so because his reasoning is that the situation in the church was so bad. It was so bad that people basically just couldn't find a Catholic priest that would actually give them sound doctrine. They just couldn't. They couldn't find someone who would give them the sacraments the way that they needed them. Because here's the reality, okay? Father Ripperger here talks about being sure of the validity. Well, when we look at how sacraments are valid or not, it's actually a little bit more complicated than people would have us believe. It's not just the case that you have to say the words of consecration. You actually have to believe, at least in some implicit way, that what you're doing is what the church intends to do. And forgive me here, I'm looking through this book to try to find the actual story of St. Eusebius of Samosate. But in this, for the sacraments to be valid, it's possible for a priest to err in his intention. This is rare, but it's possible. The only way we could know if a priest could err in his intention, and I can just look this up here so I don't get this wrong. This is, if I'm not mistaken here, yeah, this is from Cardinal. He was under Pius X. Yeah, Cardinal Below. I think he was under Pius X or Pius IX. I can't remember. So I'll share this on the screen here. This is from EWTN. So this is not a pro Sspx site. If you look up their stuff, even today they still have documents up saying you can't go to the Sspx, which is just not what the church says. But anyway, says intention is required for the valid administration of the sacraments. Faith and uprightness, however, are required that the sacrament be worthily performed. Okay. So this document here goes through how someone has the proper intention for a sacrament. It's way too much for us to go through all the way here. But if you just look up intentions required for sacraments in EWTN, you will find it. There's a money quote. Here it is right here. These are errors that have been said about sacraments. Okay. So this one right here. No intention is required for the validity of the sacraments. It suffices that any kind of external rite be performed. That's sort of the extreme of the Protestant error. Here's a theory of a fellow named Catharinus, okay? And he taught that the material, highlight that here, the material performance of the external rite, when it is performed freely, seriously, and without any jest, suffices for the validity of the sacrament, even if the minister has a contrary interior intention. Some others have welcomed this opinion, particularly some of the faculty of the University of Paris, although they modify the opinion with the restrictive clause that an external intention does not suffice unless the external rite, considered along with the circumstances of place and time, and the state of the minister seems to those watching to be a sacrament. So this is actually an error, this idea that as long as he says the words properly, the sacrament's valid. That's actually an error. Now, it has been defined. This is what the doctrine is on how intention works. It has been defined against heretics that it is necessary for the validity of the sacrament that there be in the minister the intention of doing what the church does. Now, in order to have this intention, moreover, it is commonly taught that it is not necessary that the minister will directly and explicitly to confect the sacrament or to perform the rite as instituted by Christ and productive of grace. B, nor does an external intention suffice in the sense of Catharinus. C, but it is required and also sufficient that there be an internal intention, at least implicit, of performing the rite as it is customarily performed in the true church, with all that it includes or is thought even falsely to include, or of doing what Christians are accustomed to do through such a rite. For by doing so, the minister makes his own the intentions of the Christians. This is really important. This right here, of doing what Christians are accustomed to do. So basically, this thing here is saying, listen, it's not enough that you just say the words. But at the same time, it's not as if every priest who performs some sacrament has to have some illuminative unity with God, that he is having a mystical experience where he is fully in understanding what it means to be doing things, and consubstantial and transubstantiation. You don't have to have that sort of depth to it. But he has to at least be intending to do what Christians are accustomed to do through such a rite. Well, the thing is, the Novus Ordo is not a customary rite. In fact, it's almost an exact carbon copy of the rite of the Anglicans. And the rite of the Anglicans was developed. The rite of the Anglicans was developed to diminish belief in the real presence. Anyway, all this long-winded thing here is to say, Father Ripperger is correct that under the normal circumstances, that we shouldn't be messing around with whether or not there are the aspects of validity and laicity. But what do you do if you're in such a crisis where you're going to masses and you don't even know if the totally on paper licit priest, by the acts that he's performing, even has the proper intention? You can't know for certain. All you can do is look at the external manifestations. So if you've got a janky liturgy and you've got terrible preaching and you've got suspect moral theology and the seminary has trained these guys poorly, it is probably the case that the priest performing the act believes. I would hope so. But what if he was trained to believe that the Eucharist is just a symbol? It's not really clear what that would mean. What if he was trained to believe in consubstantial thing, which is Lutheran theology? That's been taught sadly to Catholic priests. These are things that we actually don't know. Now, we can never be 100% certain, but what Father Ripperger talks about, he talks about having moral certainty, meaning we look at the situation and we go, I'm as certain as I'll ever be. Well, it's quite reasonable that many Catholics would look at the situation at your average parish and say, I can't be certain about what I need to be certain about because this is messed up. That's a totally reasonable position. You don't have to be a schismatic. You don't have to be an extremist. You just look around and you say, this just doesn't feel Catholic to me. You have a Catholic sense. So back to what St. Eusebius of Samosate said or did. So he went around conferring the power of orders on these bishops, on these priests, on these Catholic priests and bishops. He had no jurisdiction to do so in the normal sense. He had no jurisdiction to do so. So how did he become a saint? Well, because essentially he acted in the realm of healer. What does that mean? He looked around and he said, these people do not have Orthodox priests. They do not have Orthodox bishops. They're surrounded by Arians. We just can't sit back and say, well, as long as it's licit, boys, as long as it's valid, as long as it's there. We don't know if it is, because if they don't believe that Jesus Christ is actually true God and true man, then how can they render the true sacrifice? These matters of distinction, they're not something we can just pass aside. I mean, we look at the rival schools of the Dominicans and the Franciscans. I can't find that thing here. It's so annoying. I found it 1,000 times. Anyway, it's a big book. Distinctions are extremely important. This is why we have whole councils about distinctions. Anyway, Father Ripperger here is basically arguing that under the normal circumstances, if there was no crisis, that this thing would not really make sense. But we know from church history, when there is a crisis, that we have a saint named St. Eusebius of Samosate. I believe the modernist crisis we're in is actually worse than the Arian crisis, because Arianism was one heresy and modernism is a synthesis of all the heresies. It's kind of a big deal. And Archbishop Lefebvre acted in a way that there was precedent in church history for, and canon law vindicates him as well. So what have we seen? We've seen that the church acted illegally in the way that she carried out the suppression of the Sspx in the beginning. Archbishop Lefebvre was not incorrect in saying that he was going to continue to exclusively say the traditional Latin Mass, because Pope Benedict said that the traditional Latin Mass was never abrogated. The consecrations of the 4 bishops was not a schismatic act, according to expert theological interpretation from a lawyer who was both a lawyer in the common law courts and in the civil and in the church courts. And therefore, there was no schism or excommunication to begin with, and the church herself had acted illegally, or in error, I guess, which that can happen when it's matters that are not of faith and morals. So that being the case, I don't really know if there's much of a basis for this argument, and his assertion that the church tradition does not shows us that we should never act in ways where sacraments are speculative. That's not what we see with the case of Saint Eusebius of Samosate. If you were a canon lawyer in the 400s, 300s, trying to figure out what was happening in the Arian crisis, it's like you've got these bishops who are Arian bishops, but they have apostolic succession, and they have dioceses. They're either Arians or semi-Arians. Then you've got this other bishop coming in and saying, to heck with these guys, they can't actually teach you the faith because they don't believe it. It's just his opinion, but it was a strong opinion. And he goes around conferring the power of orders on other men so that you can get your sacraments. That's a canonical mess. Imagine trying to be a canon lawyer that time. The supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls. When things are messy, we go with the benefit of the doubt for the great men of the church, for the supreme law of the church being the salvation of souls. I think that applies to Marcel Lefebvre. There's more that he has to say here. We'll listen to a little bit more.
The tradition is clear. You must follow the tutor's position. Speculating about a thing immediately removes it from that ambit. So you have to be careful about that. So what does this really mean? It reminds me of the prophecy of St. Francis. If you get a chance, get on the internet, just type in the prophecy of St. Francis. And one of the things he says in there, he says there's going to come a time when there's going to be a multiplication of opinions. And this is where we're at today. The Vatican comes out and says X, and then 15 other people who have no jurisdiction are saying all sorts of different things in relationship to it. This is a problem. I once said to people, I said, not Vatican to itself, but the actual aftermath of Vatican II has rendered the lay people ungovernable. We're in a stage now where you can't tell them anything, you can't govern them, you can't get them to do what they're supposed to do, even before, because they're all their own popes now. And that's what modernism does. It makes you the arbiter about what you believe in matters of religion.
So I agree with Father Ripperger there. Modernism has made us all our own little popes, which I think is evident in the Sspx crisis, but I would say in Sspx saga, but I would say in a different direction. The fact is that Father Ripperger talks about there'll be a time where there'll be a multiplication of opinions. Yes, there are a multiplication of multiple opinions, and his opinion is one of them. But the opinion of Bishop Schneider and Cardinal Gagnon and this priest who was a canon lawyer and theologian who we read, those opinions are also other opinions, and theirs seem to be in line with the totality of the thing. Again, Father Ripperger's opinion is totally worth listening to, and he's an incredible priest who, go listen to literally every talk Father Ripperger has ever done, and you'll be a better person for it. But for some reason in the past, it seems like he's taken a position that I just don't think is the strongest position he's ever taken. Again, I love Father Ripperger. To be honest, if this is shown to him and he's mad at me, I would love him to call me and tell me how mad he is at me, because I would just love the chance to talk to Father Ripperger. He's just absolutely wonderful. And again, this was years ago. Perhaps he's changed his mind. I have no idea. But this is just what's out there. And I've constantly been past this thing. And the rest of this video is more sort of just him opining on things rather than bringing up sort of more of historical matters. And as it stands today, much has changed since he had made this talk as well. So, anyway, that's probably the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to get through today. And I'm going to answer some things in the chat now. So I'm going to I didn't even open it right now because I would be so distracted. So let's just see the flood of questions we have here. So again, if you want to ask a question, I'm going to scroll to the bottom here because I can't look back at all of them. If you want to ask a question, do three question marks. How about this one? Kennedy. What is it? Kennedy, legit question. Would the SSPX or SSPX priests consider that attending a Reverend Novus Ordo Mass like St. John Cantius in Chicago a sin? So how would answer this? Well, first of all, for a mass, for it to be a sin to attend a mass, you would have to do something knowingly with an intention. So, personally, I will not go to a Novus Ordo Mass and participate. I did attend a Novus Ordo Mass, and that's different than participating. So attending a Novus Ordo Mass is not a sin if there's reasons to go, of course. Well, even then, I mean, would it be a sin to go to? Well, you're talking about a reverend one, but would it be a sin to go to Mass if Father James Martin was preaching? I think so. I think it'd be a sin to bring your kids because that's just messed up. But I went to a Mass in Ottawa. It wasn't a super reverend. It was actually, I hadn't been to a Novus Ordo Mass in so long. It was kind of like an out of body experience. I had to go because it was part of my job at LifeSite. We were there and we were covering some stuff. Anyway, I just sat at the back and prayed a rosary and stuff. And again, people there expressing wonderful devotion. I'm sure it was great. There was a lot of things that happened I thought were strange. But we have a lot of people don't know the same things about liturgy. It's not an elitist thing like I know things, therefore I'm better. That's not it at all. But it's just kind of once you see how the sausage is made, you go, my goodness gracious, this is Protestant. And I believe Protestantism is a heresy and I just don't want to participate in it. So, what's more here? Let's see. Please put 3 question marks. Let's see. Do you confess to an SSPX priest for going to their Mass? Yeah. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I'm about to attend your Mass. That'd be strange. Here's one. Why do some SSPX supporters act like disagreeing with the SSPX is like blasphemy? I don't know specific examples of that, but I can just speak in generalities. It's possible for anyone to fall into a sort of cult of personality about a particular individual. Maybe that's how that happens. I would say when I was getting this ready for this Father Ripperger episode ready, there were people that were already super angry that I was just going to even disagree with Father Ripperger on the internet. And I thought, wow, that says a lot. So I think anyone is liable to that. Okay. Here's a good one. 3 question marks. Thank you. Suppose an SSPX community shares a worship space with a Novus Ordo Life Teen community. This would never happen. It just wouldn't. It's not even a question. But let's just entertain it. Suppose the SSPX runs out of hosts. They wouldn't. They would just cut. So if you go to a traditional Mass, maybe it happens with Novus Ordo, but they'll see the amount of parishioners and they'll go, very carefully over at the altar and they'll just, cut them, like break them and be careful of all the particles and things like that. And then you just get a smaller portion of the host, but it's the fullness of the body, blood, soul, and divinity. So it's fine. Yeah. So that would happen. So it says, this one says, the video of Father, that video was from 2015. Likely Father's opinion could have changed after. I mean, wasn't Bishop Schneider's opinion after this? I don't know. I don't know if his opinions changed or if Bishop Schneider's was. I know Bishop Schneider was in 2015. I don't know if I don't know. But even then, if it's as recent as 2015, that's still a little bit strange. And again, Father Ripperger was speaking about it as if he didn't mention crisis, right? Like if you're going to talk about the SSPX, then you have to, at least in my opinion, you have to talk about crisis. I mean, that'd be like talking about Athanasius without talking about Arianism. You can't do that. It's one of the things that I found interesting. Father Ripperger is one of the greatest voices in the church, in the English-speaking language, at explaining the crisis. I mean, talk about someone who dismantled liturgical problems. This Father Ripperger. Talk about somebody who has said things about the charismatic renewal. I mean, he goes after all the things that he sees problems in. But he just, for some reason, I don't know why that's not applied to the Sspx. I don't understand that. Because it is a thing. I mean, the canon law gives stipulation for state of necessity, and so does church history. This is okay. Quick thoughts on evolution. I think evolution is complete and utter nonsense, and it's like the dumbest thing that's ever been invented in human history. Does that work? Sorry, this fellow said when I answered his question about going to a Novus Ordo, it didn't answer. You said attending. So attending is one thing. Participating is another. Personally, I will never participate in a Novus Ordo Mass. It's not going to happen. Because Cardinal Ottaviani in 1969, whenever it was, with the help of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, they said that the Novus Ordo Mass, even the Unicorn Novus Ordo, like the Reverent Novus Ordo, just the text, was Protestant. So there's your answer. Luis Gonzalez, bienvenidos. Do you have a list of the canons you cited in this show? Sure. Canon 848. Sorry, write this down or record it, whatever. Canon 844. Canon 1324. Canon 1323. Canon 751. I think that's it. Oh, Canon 1335. That talks about going to even suspended priests. There you go. How do you answer someone like Cardinal Burke, who is an expert canon lawyer and judge? Yeah, he still says the SSPX is schismatic. I don't know. I don't answer him because I don't know how to answer that. Like, I think he said that as recently as last year on Matt Fradd's show. That's just like, that's strange. I mean, let's take Father Ripperger, like even Father Ripperger, who is saying that there's a problem. He said they're not schismatic and they're in the church because he's just going by the letter of the law without taking into account the idea of crisis. I really have no idea why Father Burke or Cardinal Burke. I have no idea. So I can't speak for him. I really don't have an answer to that. It's strange. My friend Julie. Yes, answer regarding evolution. Yes, it's really stupid. That's the answer. I should say this. It is not a dogma that you have to believe in a young earth. It's really strong. I believe in young earth. It's really strong, but I wouldn't say that you could be anathematized. I don't think that's possible. There's still room for mystery. That's just the fact. But it is de fide that we have to adhere to the special creation of Adam, our first parents, made specially, so not born of apes or something like that. So it really doesn't leave any room for at least human evolution. Whether there was some sort of development of various types of species, I don't know, in some other way. I mean, I guess that's technically possible. I don't buy it. I think it's dumb. But it's not like it's been anathematized. Let's put it that way. So we can't take that approach either and then just start calling everybody a heretic. Your thoughts on future SSPX bishops? Yeah, that's an interesting one because the bishops are getting old. Well, there's a retired bishop. I can't remember his name, but he's living with the society in Switzerland, in Écône, and he's doing stuff with them. So I guess there's a bishop with them in a way. I don't know what happened. I think they have to ordain some bishops or consecrate them at some point. I wish we had more now because no one can cross any borders. We haven't been able to have confirmations at our chapel in like 2 years. I have no idea. That's a big, Marcel Lefebvre, when you read his life, he really was. He was, I think we forget. So we have this idea of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost. By the way, it is said Holy Spirit sometimes in pre-Vatican II writings. So if someone says Holy Spirit, it's not that they're not a trad if they said it. I say Holy Ghost, but you actually do find it. Sometimes in the writings, you'll find both Spirit and Ghost, like back and forth. So anyway, English is the only one who had that problem because in other languages, it's just Santo Spirito or something like that. It didn't change. In English, it makes more sense to say Holy Ghost, in my opinion, because a ghost is an individual spirit rather than spirit could be like the spirit of the age, which is vague, which I think has been used by the modernists. But at any rate, Archbishop Lefebvre, he was a Holy Ghost father. We think of the Holy Ghost thing now as kind of like the charismatic renewal, really eccentric, extroverted people, having, these experiences with the Holy Ghost. Father Ripperger, Archbishop Lefebvre was formed in the order of priests whose literal charism was to be infused like with the Holy Ghost, and live by providence. It just was very different in the traditional sense. So when you look at his life, everything is about providence. Like he every answer to every question in his life is providence has given us an answer. Like we've prayed for something to happen, we don't act until there's a sign. There's a sign, and then we act. And it served him greatly. So whatever the Sspx bishops are, what the situation will be, I imagine they will leave it up to providence. Okay. So all the communities that enter into full communion, quote unquote, must accept that 5% of Vatican II. Does this go with all the liturgical abuses? They must be okay with that to get their permission to say the TLM. So I think what you're trying to get at here is if you're listed as full communion, if you're listed as full communion, that means you accept all the bad parts of Vatican II interpretations or something. I don't think that's the case. No. I know that the FSSP priests have historically, I don't think they've ever really done the concelebration. So they've even sort of maintained their position of not saying the Novus Ordo. They wouldn't concelebrate at the Chrism Mass, for example. Also, the Society or Lefebvre signed a protocol with Ratzinger in 1988, where it was said you were allowed to disagree with certain parts and how they were interpreted and sort of interpret them in the old way. So even there, Vatican II is a mess. So I think it's just a mess for everybody. Who is the holiest theologian living in the world? I don't know. I think I've never talked to Bishop Schneider. I will be talking to him on June 7th on this show. I think Bishop Schneider is one of the holiest men around. To be honest, the holiest man alive is probably someone we don't even know about. He's probably some theologian in a monastery. So it'd probably be hard to get that guy on the show. Does Cardinal Burke say the Novus Ordo Mass? I don't think so. I'm sure he did, but I don't think he does. Please explain confirmation with the SSPX versus the Novus Ordo. So it's really just traditional confirmation versus Novus Ordo confirmation. As far as I can tell, it's not the case that the society or traditionalists believe that all Novus Ordo confirmations are invalid. It's just that historically it was done in a certain way and particularly with certain matter, and then that's dubious in the new form depending on how it's interpreted. It's kind of like everything else. There you go. The Gas Man. I go to the SSPX, FSSP, Byzantine Rite, and a diocesan parish where the priest offers traditional Latin Mass. Al Smith is just a bloody gem. Isn't that guy the best? He's the best. Yeah, I've never been to a Byzantine Rite, but I'd love to go when I visit my buddy in Windsor. Shout out Sarmad. Okay, a few more questions here. I got a little bit of time. The kids are down, so. So here it is. The apostolic letter I mentioned was in 2016 where Pope Francis says SSPX priest. I think this is actually from a conversation in the chat. Who knows? Um, oh, here you go. Thank you for this answer. Was that a Carlist flag? That's pretty cool if it is. Bishop Fillet said in the Crisis series that another submission would be given to Rome for more bishops. Ah, that's right. I did read that. I hear that. And if they delay or say no again, they would go the same route. See, this is actually really important. This is actually really, really, really important. One of the reasons why the society has always demonstrated that they're not schismatic. For one, they don't reject all the church. The schismatics like Luther, they reject like the church fathers. Okay, they don't do that. But one of the reasons why it's so important to see what they've done is because they follow the normal protocols. Okay, they follow the normal protocols, and then once they've exhausted all their options, and there is the matter of the salvation of souls, which is suprema lex, the highest law of the church, then they act as moderately as possible and do not cross any non-negotiable lines. That's how they've always acted. Mike McCann, is the bishop you've alluded to Bishop Vitus Huander? I believe so. I can't remember the name though. He says my buddy Sarmad says he said Holy Spirit when playing with our family. It's all right. I'll forgive you. Hi, Kennedy. My nephew is struggling with homosexuality. Would Sspx be helpful for him to change his ways? That's a loaded question. I think seeking out the advice of a good, strong priest would just be helpful for a lot of reasons. And that would be one of those situations where it'd be helpful. Let's see here. Any more questions? Here's one. Please, I'm seeing them without the question marks, but it makes it easier. Mr. Hall, what are your thoughts about Michael Lofton and his channel Reason and Theology? I think Michael Lofton's done some great stuff. To be honest, I haven't watched him in a long time, so I don't really know. Have you heard of Father Michael Boniface? He is an apostle of Latin America, has a channel called Amigos de la Fraternidad. I haven't, but sounds awesome. I should look him up. Oh, yes. There's a great article written by Father Z, by the way. I looked that up about the society. And Father Z has an amazing opinion, actually, because he worked in the Ecclesia Dei Commission. So his job was to understand the traditional communities. And he said, you can go there. There's no problem. This is great from Mr. Smith. Read Archbishop Sheen's book of Sacraments, and he describes the rite. Yeah. Bishop Sheen... Bishop Sheen was awesome. So yeah, look up what Bishop Sheen said on sacraments. Can you talk about your opinion of the value of watching masses from the society live? Is it like hearing a mass but not receiving communion? I wouldn't say it's like that. I would say it's better than watching me talk. But I wouldn't say it's like, this is a funny story. When I was in Ottawa last week for the March for Life, it was awesome. I love working for LifeSite News. I went to Mass twice at St. Clement's for the FSSP on the same day. I only received once, but here's why that happened. So it's a whirlwind, talk to John Henry Weston, he's such a hero of the faith and pro-life and all that. And every time you go to one of these pro-life events, the devil just tries to do everything he can to make sure it's impossible. I won't tell you all the details, but it was almost impossible for me to get there. It was just crazy. And same for him and same for everybody. Okay. And the strangest things kept happening, just the strangest things. I got pulled over in my rental car, 10 minutes from my house, because I was going 25 over the speed limit, which I never do. I've literally never had a speeding ticket, but I was in this little Mazda rental car thing. I'm used to driving the minivan, and you just touch the gas and it goes zips down the road. I get pulled over and I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. I literally have never had a speeding ticket. People actually get annoyed at how slow I drive. I figure I'll get there when I'll get there. And I'm never late for things because I always leave early. Anyway. But I was praying the rosary and the lady came back and just gave me a warning and it was fine. But it was little things like that kept happening. So anyway, we were going to all go to Mass and we were going to go to St. Clement's for the traditional Mass on the day of the March for Life. So we were all in a whirlwind trying to get there. We had crazy days getting in. We check into our hotel. It's like late, and we're like, all right, I'll see you guys in the morning for Mass. I just looked up when Mass was, and it was at 7 a.m. at St. Clement's. So I just went there, and no one else was there. And I was like, I guess it's a bad turnout. It was just a low Mass, and it was 7 in the morning, and it was okay. It was great. To me, I love low Mass by myself because like I've got wonderful little children, but they're busy and stuff, and crying babies and all this kind of stuff. So if I can go to a low Mass, it's like, oh my goodness gracious, it's paradise. By myself, are you kidding me? Anyway, I get back to the hotel, and John Henry is like, so when are we going to Mass? I'm like, I already went. He's like, no, it's at 10. Anyway, so I went to Mass a second time because we all went together. I didn't receive the second time. The second one was a high Mass, incredible choir. What an amazing parish. Pro-life sermon, just a great thing. And I didn't receive the second time, but being there and praying with the Mass was much better than watching it. So that kind of, I think, answers that question. So I'm going to call foul on this. SSPX is compromised, which is the reason for the formation of the SSPX resistance. So the neo-SSPX is in error as the rest of Rome. That's not even true at all. No, that's not true. The SSPX are... the SSPX believe the same things they always did. The SSPX are actually kind of moderates because Thomists are supposed to be kind of moderate because it's the golden mean we're looking after. I don't agree with the resistance position, although I understand it. I don't agree with it. Crossing non-negotiable lines. What does that mean? What I mean is, like we talked about, setting up, if you were to confer, if you were to do something that would go against something that a line you can't cross. So, for example, setting up a bishop with his own see is crossing a line. That's setting up a diocesan structure. That's conferring the power of jurisdiction. This is what we talked about in the letter at the beginning of the show. That would be crossing a non-negotiable line. Joseph says he's a Platonist. I'm a Platonist too. Good job, buddy. Do you know why the SSPX doesn't use the pre-55 missile instead of 1962? Yeah, the answer is basically the couple reasons. They received the 1955 one, and Lefebvre himself was not a liturgical purist. He actually wasn't. He wasn't he was not doing it for aesthetic reasons. So they received changes to the liturgy are valid as long as they're orthodox. The Pope could change. There could have been a Mass made after the Second Vatican Council that took to heart the recommendations and would have looked different than the 1962, but would not have been a problem at all. That could have happened. It just didn't. Instead, what we got was a pseudo-Protestant thing, which is not orthodox. Hence why, there are actually people who say that Novus Ordo was valid but not licit because there's no permission, which is what liceti means, to make something that's offensive to Catholic belief, right? Anyway, doesn't mean the Pope doesn't have the jurisdiction to do something like that, but the thing itself is questionable. So the 1955, I don't get the whole freaking out about the 55 Holy Week. I really don't. I'm sorry, I just don't. I attended Mass, but I've attended the Holy Week a few times with the SSPX, and I don't know. It seems really Catholic to me. I don't feel it's lacking in any way. I know people will freak out about that. But there's a scholar named Luis Tafari who talks about that. As far as why is the SSPX doesn't do anything about it, for one, they don't want the impression of being seen as these liturgy snobs. In addition, it's what they received, and it's about it's a matter of self-defense. They're not going to go further than they need to go in order to defend tradition. The pre-55 Holy Week has recently become a thing. So perhaps maybe they'll start saying it. I don't know. But the last thing they would want is to go across a line and it's like, see, told you, they're a bunch of liturgy snobs, when it's really immaterial to the passing on of tradition in their chapels. Someone could argue that the pre-55 is better, and it was the changes were setting up the possible changes for them. That might be the case. But the fact is, you go to the 55 Holy Week and you don't have, there's no problems with Catholicism in it, if that makes sense. Thoughts on Father Relier? Father Isaac's great. Yeah, he's great. Is Father James Martin allowed to celebrate at an Sspx Lord's Supper? I don't know. We should probably ask him. My buddy Sarmad, he says, please support Kennedy any way you can. Yeah, I haven't done any grifting this show. I did mention my book, but if you could, the video quality and stuff is getting better. We've got, this stuff isn't free. This is a very nice microphone, and we got a nice camera and stuff, and we're still upgrading. And I know this can be a little bit choppy here and there. Probably got to get a better video capture card. Anyway, thank you for all your support. If you could consider becoming a patron, links in the description. And if you don't want to become a patron, send some good vibes. Don't worry, I'm not actually advocating for the New Age. But you can do one-time donations. Link is there as well. So with the exchange rate, $5 American is like $1,000 Canadian, so that'd be good. Lefebvre at one time had a beard. Do SSPX priests have beards? Lefebvre had a beard when he was on the missions. There have been reasons why priests have beards. Sometimes it can be cultural. So, for example, when the priests would go to the East, they would have beards because everyone wore a beard. Or when they would go to places where they didn't have good access to medical treatment, they wouldn't take the risk of getting infections by cutting themselves shavings. I think that's one of the main reasons they had beards in Africa. This is a good question. Are you familiar with Our Lady of Buen Suceso? Yes, I am. I've done videos on her before. She warned us of this time. I believe there is a connection between her and prophecies in the SSPX. Yes, I believe Marcel Lefebvre might be the prelate prophesied by Our Lady. I'm going to do a video on that. Thanks for reminding me. A few more questions here. Anyone else? Do you think it is okay to attend Latin Mass with non-SSPX communities? Yeah, for sure. There are plenty of great traditional priests out there, for sure. Yes, didn't Lefebvre sign Sacrosanctum Concilium? Yeah, so Lefebvre signed the documents of Vatican II. I don't know if he signed all of them, but anyway. Lefebvre was a son of the church, and he wanted to interpret things as best as he possibly could. He did a version of the Sacrosanctum Mass for a little time. Roughly, it was called the 65 Missal. He did say a French translation of the Mass. It was a traditional Mass translated into French. He did that. I think he did it once or something. You can find that in his document, in his biography here. And he did say one time a Mass facing the people, and he said it felt pretty awkward. So again, he wasn't against liturgical reform. It was just these things were harmful to the faith. This person says, a priest of SSPX MC, I think that's Resistance, says if Archbishop Marcel would have used a 55 missal, pre-55 if he was alive and read the biography of Bonini. There are people who have different opinions on Bonini, actually. This is just me relaying a message. Bonini, some people say he didn't actually enter into Freemasonry until after that. They say he was approached by the Freemasons once he was once he was exiled. Anyway, so I don't know. Could be. Al Smith. I'm working on getting Guinness to support the Kennedy Report. There we go, my friend. Question. Supply jurisdiction was disacknowledged by the Church since Pope Francis granted the Sspx faculties. So the supply jurisdiction is acknowledged in canon law. Canon 1335, any member of the faithful can approach even a suspended priest for any sacrament for any just cause. That's pretty simple. So you walk into a confessional, you want to save your soul, it's pretty just. Do I ever work with the society? I am not employed by the SSPX. No, I just love the priests. They're just the best in the world. So I just feel like I owe it to them because they've been so wonderful to me and my family. I should say, though, I do help publish a magazine alongside some parishioners and under the guidance of a priest, but it is not an official SSPX magazine. Okay. I think I've answered any more questions. I think that's it. Oh, Garabandal. I don't think it's legit. That's just what I've heard. Okay. I think that's it. Oh, one more. Do you think that Lefebvre will be canonized? Yes. 100%. In our lifetime? I don't know. I didn't think a lot of things would happen in our lifetime. I didn't think the last 2 years, I mean, what the heck happened there? So who knows? I believe the consecration of Russia of the Immaculate Heart was valid. So I know that in the end, Our Lady's Immaculate Heart will triumph. So I would imagine if there was a restoration in the church that Lefebvre would be canonized. I think one day he'll be a doctor of the church, probably a doctor of the priesthood, maybe a doctor of missions or something like that, if that's a thing. And I think he'll be canonized, a great saint. I think he might be the greatest saint in 100 years. You know, maybe someone might say Padre Pio. I don't know. But I say 100 years because it's 2022. Okay. I mean, Pius X was earlier than that, earlier than 100 years ago. Maximilian Kolbe was really great. I mean, there's some great ones, but he might be the greatest saint from the perspective of the fact that, you know, what he did for the church. I don't know if we understand. I don't know if we know how amazing that was. I don't know if we know how amazing that was. I don't know if we'll know that for a long time. You know, yeah, it's just, I don't know how to put it into words what he's done for Catholics. You know, it's not fair to say that because they changed the mass, people left the church. Because obviously, if you have faith, you'll stick certain things out. But the church is supposed to have a paternal reality over us. This is why we call our priests fathers, or we call the nuns mothers. You know, when you interact with the mother superior or things like that. You know, there's a parental aspect. So, you know, if your dad gives you dust for dinner, are you justified in telling him to go, you know, something? No, but it's understandable that the stressors were there, you know. If you come back to mass and they've turned your church into an abomination, is it sufficient? Is that are you excused for leaving the Catholic Church? No, but it's really messed up that they even did that to you, you know, and it shouldn't happen. And it really is the greater sin, I think, on behalf of those who did it. And Archbishop Lefebvre, you know, there are so many people worldwide who will come back. Like, we're talking thousands of souls, and every single soul is worth a crucifixion. Remember that. And there are people who will come back to the church because they they smell incense or hear something from a building, and they're like, my goodness gracious, that's like when I was a child. I haven't been to mass in 40 years because it was insane when it changed. I just couldn't go back. And I saw this thing, and I just went back, and my goodness, I felt like I went home. There are countless stories. There are probably hundreds of thousands of stories like this with the Sspx over the years. I don't know if we know how incredible. I don't know, I don't know if we understand just how many souls aren't damned because of Marcel Lefebvre. And this is just in his later career. This isn't even including what he did in Africa. He really was, if he wasn't the greatest saint, he was the greatest missionary in 100 years. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's see if there's a couple more. I've just got time to kill here, Have you watched the 1 Peter 5 interview? Oops. Have you watched the 1 Peter 5 interview with Father Murr, where he touches on a lot what you're talking about? Yes, and Father Murr is a friend of mine, and I just narrated his audiobook about that book that he was talking about, and it'll be out shortly. So if you want to hear me doing a French and Italian accent, buy that book when it comes out. Okay. I think that's it. All right. This is thank you for everyone for joining me. Please like and subscribe this video, this channel, and so on and so forth. And I'm just so happy you're all here. This is amazing. This channel keeps growing. So thank you to everyone who's showed up. I hope this is helpful. And I hope I've been charitable. I think Father Ripperger is amazing. I've heard he's got a great taste in whiskey, and he's got an even better taste in tobacco. And goodness gracious, would I love to sit down and, fill up a bowl and a cup with that man. And so God bless Father Ripperger, and God bless Marcel Lefebvre. This has been the Kennedy Report. Until next time, God bless.